Don't stop.
Hi, thanks so much for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. I'm your host, Zach Randles-Friedman. I have part of my job to do this podcast is to do social media and do kind of the promotion around my show on my Instagram channel and YouTube. And I push stuff out on Facebook and into Facebook groups and stuff. And as I'm doing that, I've really kind of noticed just the algorithms are picking up. If I look up one thing or I click on one video or I read an article a little too long, what's happening is that's all I'm getting. Also, because I have a news podcast called Listen Up Girl, where I do like 10 minutes or less of LGBTQ plus news. And I'm doing it like 5 or 6 days a week now. And I'm also doing some special reports. So I did a special report on Renee Good and Heated Rivalry, the hockey show that's on HBO Max. So I do interesting stories. I do like major news stories. I did a new special report on the new New York City mayor, and I give both sides. Like I'm talking about like why people didn't want to elect him and why people did elect him, and what's the LGBTQ plus community think about him. Because like I think 81% of people like voted for him in the LGBTQ plus community. He's very super pro-trans, which is what we need in the world. We need people to be pro everything. But the thing that I'm running into now is that I am getting like overwhelmed by the amount of negative news. And then also, so ICE, for example, everything is about ICE. We were talking about the Epstein files, and the reason why ICE is becoming such a big deal is because I think we're trying to avoid, the Epstein files, is my guess. I don't know. That's what I think. But you hear nothing about at least I'm not hearing anything about the Epstein files. Again, because my algorithm is showing me all these horrific videos of people that are being impacted by ICE in Minneapolis, other cities and states as well. But Minneapolis is the main hub right now, where they're just showing these innocent people living their lives and being tormented by these ICE agents, where I don't even want to go on to my Instagram. I don't want to go on to my Facebook to promote my podcast that I'm doing. I go to YouTube multiple times a day. I have YouTube on the TV, in my big TV down in my bedroom, because I watch YouTube videos on TV now, which is like, whoever thought that that's where you would watch YouTube? I always thought it would be on a computer or a phone, but now it's like on my TV. And so it's just, the news is just overwhelming. And but the other part that's overwhelming is that I am tired of the clickbait, because like I'll start reading a story on social media and then I want you to click on the link to get more. And then you go to more and it's like 45 ads of products that I have no interest in and that I don't want. And I want the news. I want to know about the story that I was reading in a social media post, and it says click to learn more, and I click to learn more, and I can't even really get to it unless I go through 6 or 7 ads. And I think my biggest thing really is that the news is just so negative, and it feels like wherever it's coming from, the news is coming, it's biased based on the organization that's putting out the news. And yeah, it's hard to do a news podcast sometimes whenever you're so tired of hearing the negativity. And there's times that I struggle with putting out my Listen Up Girl podcast news. But I do go and I look for positive stories and I put those out there. And, I'll get past it. I think everybody has those moments, especially during election time, where like, I have to stop. I can't do any more news for a while, or I'm not watching the news. Like I went through that phase multiple times throughout the last, 8 years where I'm like, I'm done with news. I don't want to hear any more about the election. I don't want to hear about the Democrats. I don't want to hear about the Republicans. I don't want to hear about the independents. I don't want to hear about anything about the election. And, it's all the negativity. And now we're hearing about Greenland, and we're hearing about Iran, and we're hearing about, the killing of, Renee Good and ICE agents. And it's the same news cycle over and over and over. And none of it is positive, and it's super, it causes me anxiety, like super anxiety from it. So I don't know if you feel this way, but I do. And I think everybody is kind of just like, what world are we living in today? Like, I say this all the time to myself, and I've said on this podcast a few times, like, how did we get here? Like, how did we get to this amount of kind of craziness? But my guest today's name is Kira, and I love what he's doing. He has a new product. It's called Inform.now, and you sign up for it, and he doesn't have any sponsors, no ads, no sponsors, none of that. And he's giving the real news out, and he's giving it through text message, and he's giving it quick little bites of it. And it's not influenced by, a Fox News where they have certain sponsors or their audience. If they, turn against, a certain political party, then their audience is upset and mad. Or if it's CNN, if they're, talking about something that their demographics are not for, then, people are upset. And you never know, like, what you're hearing is, if it's true or not, if it's fact checked, if it's fake news, or whatever the case may be. But this guy Kira is like got a really good product out there. The interesting thing is that Andrew, my husband, actually signed up for it before I even told him about this. Like, he knew about it because he wants good news. He gets overwhelmed by the news as well, and he wants good, informed news. And it's called Inform Now. Inform.now is the website. And I signed up for it. And I think that what Kira is doing is pretty fantastic. So he's helping try to manage all that anxiety we all have from the overwhelming amount of clickbait news and sponsorship news. And I found him fascinating that he's doing this. He's a 4-time entrepreneur, and he has a good head in his shoulders. And I really was so happy that I got a chance to interview him. So listen to the interview, leave a comment, let me know what you think about the interview, and let me know if you sign up for his website, for his news, Inform.now, if you sign up for it. And looking forward to hearing from all of you. Thanks for listening. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything in a Bit Gay podcast. Today, I have a really great guest, and I cannot wait to have this conversation. Kira Shishkin is he's an entrepreneur. How many companies have you started? 4?
This is my 4th, yes.
Yeah, so amazing entrepreneurship that you have, and you have a new project called Inform.now, and I'm really excited to talk about this. And I'll just tell you that before I even heard your name or we started planning this episode, my husband said, "Oh, there's this website called Inform.now that I signed up for text." So he already knew about it, and I didn't even have to explain it to him because he already found it.
Oh, that means so much to me, and that's exactly how we want to spread through friends, trusted relationships. I mean, what we're trying to do is pretty difficult, and it takes a village. But I'm impressed by your husband.
So before we get into kind of talking about the news and your website, I want to talk about you. So again, you're a 4-time entrepreneur. You've got all these kind of different business connections. But what made you, like, when you think of a project that you want to do, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Like, yes, this is it. Or what's that aha moment where you're like, this is the project I need to be a part of?
Yeah, I mean, I love that question. I think entrepreneur is just a fancy name for a problem solver, for someone who likes to observe problems and try to solve them. And so to me, I think that's the simple answer, is that if I encounter a problem that resonates with me and that I see other people struggle with as well, and I want to try to solve it, or at least give an alternative solution to solving it. That gets me really excited, gets me really motivated.
Yeah.
And with Inform.now, this is really a special kind of alignment because it honors my path as an individual, my kind of story. And it's a problem that I think is sort of a generational issue. And a lot of people are experiencing it, suffering through it, kind of dealing with it, managing it. And so it felt really natural.
Like, what is your thought on kind of the media, news media today that we have? I mean, there's so many stories that are out there, and AI's taking over some news stories where, it's like I read these stories and I'm like, this cannot be true. Sometimes it is true, and I'm like, wow, I'm shocked about that. But then other times I'm like, it's AI generated, and it's disappointing. But like, what are your thoughts on today's news?
Totally. I mean, I think we used to be in a world where getting information was difficult. It was like a challenge is to get information. Now we have the opposite problem where there's too much information. There's no longer a challenge of procuring it. There's a challenge is almost like protecting yourself from an overload of information. And so it goes hand in hand with the rise of misinformation through amplification of social media, which again doesn't promote truth or accuracy, promotes virality and trigger. Obviously, there is so much bias everywhere you look, and it all goes hand in hand to create what we call a misinformation overload, right? Which is an environment where there's so much information, a lot of people actually feel paralyzed. So then they step away and they actually say, okay, well, I'm gonna avoid news. I'm going to avoid consuming information because it's so overwhelming. We see this kind of landscape, and we want to offer an alternative, minimalist solution that informs you without draining you in the process.
I love that. I mean, we have needed this for a long time because there's been so many times where I'm just like, during election time in the United States, I'm like, I can't hear anymore. I don't want to hear about either side at all. And it just, because it's the same news stories over and over and over, and just kind of told, and they're not always accurate and stuff. So yes, I know exactly. Even in social media, like whenever I get into the algorithm of looking up something, it's like, that's what's in my algorithm. That's what's showing up in my feed for weeks. So I have to be careful what I look up, because if not, I know I'm going to be seeing that for weeks to come. So I think another interesting thing about you is that you speak 4 languages. What 4 languages do you speak? Obviously, English is one.
I speak a little bit of English, but I was born and raised in Ukraine, in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, where I learned Ukrainian. I was born to Russian parents who were transitioning from a Russian identity to a Ukrainian identity. And so I spoke Russian in the family as well. And then I had a chance to come of age in Israel, where I learned Hebrew. And that's also where I learned English before coming to the US, where I've been for quite a while on the East Coast, in the Midwest, on the West Coast.
Yeah. Where do you like the best? Which coast or which part of the country?
Listen, I think it's a very incredible country, and it's slower, like there are 50 countries in one, but I'm very partial to California.
You are? Okay. Yeah. But I think you'd be good on the East Coast too, full time though. I feel like you'd be a good East Coaster.
I wouldn't mind it. I'm just waiting for the right invitation.
Yeah, got it. So you're passionate about the information overload and just how media is kind of put out there. And again, the reason why I love what you're doing is because you're doing it much more minimalistic, where you're not doing this overload where you get, 25 stories. And sometimes it's a repeat, but it's a different version of a story. And I love that you're like boiling it down to what people really want to hear. So kind of walk me through the process of how this all came together and like what made you really want to do this. Like, were you getting overloaded in social media and with news alerts and stuff?
Totally. I feel like the experiment that we are running, or the proposition of our entire kind of endeavor, is what if you could only read news for 30 seconds a day and still get the full value of feeling informed, right? And today, a lot of the obvious outcome is, okay, people don't feel like they're informed. They don't feel like they know, or that they're part of these larger cultural, social, political, policy conversations, and say, okay, in order to get informed, I need to read more. And I think in the world of information and misinformation overload, it isn't necessarily the right answer. It's not about reading more. It's not about consuming more news. It's about reading the right ones that are pure in the sense of they don't come with bias. They don't come to suggest you how you should feel about something. They don't come with a ton of ads and solicitation and sensationalism. And so our whole kind of endeavor is, what if we could make news reading into a 30-second a day habit? To your question, how did this come about? I mean, it definitely was a very personal experience of like frustration with the media landscape.
Yeah.
But then we've tested it across a larger kind of echo. It was like, hey, does this resonate with other people? And it did. And that group of people with whom it resonates continues growing because people get increasingly more overwhelmed by what is an increasingly more overwhelming landscape.
Mhm.
So our people are growing in number, and we're demanding a minimalist way to consume media that doesn't derail us, trigger us, or drain us in the process.
Yes, media sometimes is just all the information we're getting is exhausting sometimes, right? I mean, like you hear just like what's happening in today's world with with the United States, with what's happening in Iran, what's happening across, like there's so much being thrown at us. So
Yeah.
the other piece is that there's all this clickbait that's out there. So I'll start reading a story and then it's clickbait. That's all it was because the story wasn't even true. It was just something that they knew that I was going to be interested in. I'll start reading it and then it's clickbait. Is that another thing that you're trying to avoid, obviously, from your?
I think more than anything, that's the primary thing. It's the fact that what we call is structural sensationalism. When the news media industry became optimizing for the advertisement revenue instead of for the reader revenue, meaning that the person who's paying for the news is the advertiser that you're seeing all across, buy this mortgage, buy this car, buy these socks, no longer the reader. As the incentives shifted to serving the advertiser, because that's now the main customer of the big news media company, the incentives changed and the sensationalism became structural because the advertiser wants to click your attention, or rather hijack your attention at any cost, And then they want to keep your attention hostage for as long as possible so they can serve you more solicitations, more advertisements, more kind of like content, consume. And that is probably the most fundamental issue that has sort of broken the news as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably our number one. Is a lot of our users describe us as the opposite of clickbait. And that's what we try to be.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly what we need in this world, is the opposite of clickbait for news. So I love it that you've done this. And we'll be right back. Okay, and now back to the show. Was there a particular story or a particular moment where you knew you had to do something with the news? Like, were you on some site or looking up some information or something, and you're just like, we got to fix this. Like, this is not how the world can function anymore.
I think it's a bit of a personal narrative that sort of led me to this path, and I could probably pinpoint a certain like moment, right? Like the specific moment when I was reading the news, I was like, that's enough. But to me, it was stringed on a much larger collection of like lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the reality of, I grew up in Ukraine, and then I came of age and sort of spent my young adulthood in Israel. And these are both very high stakes information conflict environments, right?
Yeah.
Where there's so much information warfare that's going on between Israel, the Arab states, there is Gaza, there is the West Bank, there is the United States, there is Russia. There's many different fractions within Israel. And I'm just talking about the political side of it, but there's so much other kind of like multipolar discourse that's constantly going on and constantly competing for buy-in from the reader. And so just this sort of information conflict in Ukraine, in Israel, I know how high the stakes are and just how unfair it is to the everyday person who is often just robbed of facts. They only get left with the commentary. They only get left with what we think you should feel. But very little is actual the infrastructure of facts to make up your own mind. So I find it to be extremely unfair, and having experienced that across multiple cultures, when I came to the US and started seeing how the news media hijacks attention here and the information conflict of the United States, I was like, wow, I've seen this show play out 3 times now, and I think I want to switch the channel.
Wow. And do you think the news in the United States is just the way it's being reported, the quality is diminishing, and you're hoping to kind of prevent that from happening for what you're doing?
I think so. And I think when it comes to like mass distribution, right? Because news are very much controlled by who distributes news. I think those are much harder channels and doors to crack. But we're not necessarily looking to save every single person out there, because that's a little bit fantastical. But we're looking to save the people, or give an alternative to people
Yeah.
that are looking for a solution like this. And as I mentioned, it's not everybody, but it's a growing number. And so I use the word save people, like obviously in a metaphoric sense. We're not saving anybody, but we're just giving an alternative to a niche of people, a group of people who are craving it. And in America, it's a very large and growing group because media has been so overwhelming. I don't think, United States media is the worst there is in the world, right? There is Iran, who just shut off internet for the entire country, right? There is other places where it's so state controlled, right? Russian media, it's so state controlled. There is no independent media. In the US, we have a lot of options, but they are structurally incentivized kind of against the reader. And the overwhelm doesn't make it easier. It makes it harder to get to the fact base.
Yeah. And, be informed without being influenced. That's great. And it's like making those real world editorial decisions and stuff. And, you're not being necessarily influenced, because I think a lot of, like, if you look at, Fox News has their audience that they're trying to influence. And then you have, the more liberal stations that are trying to influence their audience. And then you have other ones that are just like, you don't know what's actually happening sometimes, or who their audience really is. So like, do you have a demographic that you're trying to hit, or are you just trying to give the news out to just a wide range of different people?
And I love that you mentioned that, because I think it's really worth highlighting the echo chambering and the tribalism that is been part of American culture for so long. I think it almost feels like it's always been there, which historically is not the case. But there is this, polarized tribal echo chambering that at least has been the case for the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
Right. And the news media both supports that and it enables that, right? It reaffirms this world where people live in echo chambers. When you talk to a person who is very much in the Fox News media world, you can kind of tell, like, because they're reciting the headlines of Fox Media, and it's a very huge network. I mean, this is not a small player. When you're talking to a person who's in the NBC world or maybe CNN world, they're reciting different headlines, and you sort of like, wow, there are these tribes that we're navigating. And so the purpose with Inform.now is very much, it's not about reinforcing some sort of a niche and saying, okay, we're news for this specific type of person. On the contrary, we're looking to build what we're calling information infrastructure, which is for every single person, whether you are on the left side, on the right side, on the upside or the downside, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I love that.
We want to be able to enable you, to empower every single person with the facts and the ability to make up their own mind. We want to be, and we are de facto, the only news source that empowers you to make up your own mind instead of suggesting how you should feel or think about a topic.
Amazing. And also, you're subscriber supported, so there's no ads or sponsorships that are influencing anything that you're doing, which is super unique.
And probably the most important, like our main innovation, apart from the format, apart from the editorial, apart from the research approach and the technology, our main innovation is just changing the business model from serving and worshiping the advertiser into serving and worshiping the actual reader. It's so simple, and yet it's been forgotten. It's a lost art in the media industry, because the amount of money you can make serving the advertiser is not 10, but maybe 100 times more than reader supported. Well, we're not here to focus on profit. We're here to focus on the mission. And we believe that will carry us with so much more purpose than being another advertiser on the street. And so that really matters. I think the primary innovation is that supported by subscriber model, where there's nothing that we can do that doesn't align with the reader. Because if we do so, they won't support us.
Yeah.
And if they don't support us, we don't have a business. And that's very intentional. We refused advertiser, any interest, any sort of revenue. We refused that. We refused even sponsors, right? So kind of larger, bigger advertisers. We refused investors. This is a completely financially independent operation. and refuse any kind of sort of outside influence that has the ability to sway or influence our purity. Like the purity is what really matters, and that's the product. And we only serve the reader. I blabbered there a little bit.
So, I think that some people are hesitant to pay for news, but I just want to say, I think it's a smart thing to do, especially when there's no advertisers or anything influencing. Just what you described your news is. I mean, to get authentic news that's not clickbait, that's not, um, that's giving real news. To me, it's worth paying for that instead of going into CNN and seeing all these advertisers and maybe not getting the right story or MSNBC or NBC or Fox or any of them, and you're just getting a ton of pop-ups and advertisers and all this, and also you're getting kind of what the news that news organization wants you to hear. You're not necessarily always getting the full news. So I think to me, it's worth spending a little bit of money to get the proper news, because you need to stay informed. You're informed. That's what your website's called. So that's
Yeah.
exactly.
I love that you mentioned that, Zach, because I think, people have this like emotional block or like mental block to like, oh, why would I pay for news? News are supposed to be free. Well, first of all, I agree. I agree that news should have always been free, and news should have always been a public resource, just like a kind of a civil right. But they haven't been. Right? The world that we wake up in, turns out things are not free, and turns out the resource that should have been sort of publicly supported and publicly reinforced and available to anyone free of charge has actually become a huge, if not one of the biggest industries, and has been rotting in a way. And so to us, I think we are intentionally very, very affordable. We're the price of a coffee. We're not talking about fancy subscriptions. We're not talking about something that only the professional elite can afford.
Yeah.
We're talking about $5. We're talking about literally $5, because we are on a mission to make news accessible to the everyday person. And when people say, oh, I don't pay for news, I get them for free, I like to stop them and say, you're not getting news for free. You're getting opinion for free. You're getting influenced for free. But getting informed has never been free. And in fact, the professional elite knows this, right? There is all these fancy subscriptions that a lot of the Wall Street folks, a lot of the lawyers, right? Wall Street Journal, talking about Bloomberg, Reuters. There are fancy information subscriptions that exist that denoise content, but they're so expensive and so unaffordable to the everyday person that it's reserved for that 1% or 0.1%. We're building an information service that enables you to have the clarity, the confidence, and the peace of mind, but for the everyday person, not for the CEO and the board member. That's very much our kind of financial mission.
What feedback have you got from your current subscribers that has kind of surprised you the most?
Positive. I mean, we've gotten very little negative feedback, which is a little bit surprising. I'm not inviting anyone to change that.
Yeah.
But we've gotten a lot of very affirming feedback, because what we're doing is, it's not easy. It is not it's not a financially like lucrative operation in the sense of like we're not repeating that business model that everyone is, used to. We have to tell our story, and it's a hard story to tell. And because of our aversion to advertisement, we also don't advertise ourselves. And so there's been a lot of kind of sort of self-selected artificial limitations that we put on ourselves, and it's been a hard story to tell. But generally, we only attract pretty supportive audiences, and we don't really get a lot of hate, which is, I mean, it would be sad if we did, because we're sort of a public service project, masqueraded as a company. But I think some of the positive feedback that we've gotten that's been really meaningful is, someone called us the opposite, the anti-clickbait. Someone said that this one really touched him because I didn't realize that such a small product and such a small solution could change someone's life. But they said, hey, like, you've changed my like anxiety level. Like I used to be so stressed out. I used to be so nervous all the time, and I couldn't be part of these conversations. I felt like I arrived to a class not having done the reading, right? Like we've all been there in school.
Yeah.
And so this person, they felt that every day as part of a workplace conversation, part of a social conversation. They felt disconnected and they felt anxious. And they said, well, hey, since I've subscribed to Informed, it's like I didn't realize what I was subscribing to, but I was subscribing to peace of mind. And that was priceless. To me, that really touched me.
Yeah.
I can't really like find any negative feedback in my head. Either it doesn't register, which is great, but we haven't had a lot of it, which is an honor.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. And do you kind of see yourself as replacing kind of the traditional media that is doing the clickbait and doing the, they have these big sponsors that's influencing them in some way or another?
I think we're giving an alternative. It's hard to say that, we are going to be able to replace investigative journalism or primary reporting. Like these things are always going to exist and they're sort of in a very different category from us. For us, I think what we're reinventing is the very small news habit, right? If you want to learn more, you're going to have to rely on these other larger publications that write longer form. We are intentionally very, very short form, right? And so we are sort of the gateway drug into caring about the world. But then to take the next steps, there are so many other solutions that we'll do into meta journalism, investigative reporting, primary reporting on the ground, whether that's Wall Street or whether that's in Afghanistan. Those are not going away. And we honor our industry colleagues and we want to enable that.
Yeah.
We are the micro habit for the person who has been isolated from news or disconnected or feeling paralyzed by it. Yeah. We are sort of the entry point that enables the person to say, well, oh, wow, I can make news part of my life. And then take whatever next steps you might.
And we'll be right back. Okay, and now back to the show. I love it that you're thinking about, like what's your expansion plan? Because I mean, you're doing such incredible work already. And also the other thing I just wanted to mention before I get into that, people's attention spans are so small now, and that's why I just for the listeners that don't know, when you go, you're getting a text message, right? An SMS basically that is giving you the news. So it's quick and it's not like you have to go and search 20 sites to get all the news. You're kind of putting it all in one message for someone. And whenever I signed up for it, you can also kind of pick the time of day in the morning, like that fits you best. So I like pick 10 a.m. because like by then I'm at my desk, I have my coffee, I've done a meeting or two, and then, I can kind of like look at the news. That's works for me. But, I'm not even sure where I was going with this, but I think it's just really unique because you get to pick it. But I know what my question was is like, what do you want to do next though with it? Because I love it that you're talking about having investigators, on the ground and doing things like that. Is what's the future?
Totally. And thank you for describing kind of the product experience really well. We're looking to make it easier for news to become part of your daily habit. And it should only take 30 seconds, right? Yeah. Like that's something we mentioned earlier is like this can be a very micro habit, something you do with having your coffee. And this shouldn't even take the whole time you're drinking your coffee.
Yeah.
Something you're doing in an elevator ride from first floor to floor 20, depending on where you live, And we're not actually looking to, it sounds weird because every time you ask a technology or a media company, you're like, what are you doing? And they're like, this very ambitious, huge plan. To be honest, we are doubling down on the simplicity and on the minimalism what we're doing. We're not looking to go from small to huge. We're looking to stay intentionally very minimal and to tell our story better, right? To find our people better, but isn't necessarily to kind of like evolve into a larger machine because that's something that we're not actually like, that's not what we want to be. And that's also what we don't think people need. Right? So we're not looking to change the product and we're not looking to change the experience. If anything, we're looking to further simplify it and make it even easier for folks. I think our extension plans or our growth plans really come down to, telling our story really well, finding our people, not just being represented, which we are right now, very strongly in urban centers of America, but also in rural centers where people have even less optionality and even more influence on them. We want to become the de facto information infrastructure of every American and Canadian.
Yeah.
You want to put the power of facts in every American's pocket, in every American's palm. And to do that, we don't see it as building more products, getting, overcomplicating things.
Yeah.
It's really just telling the story of what we're already doing and what we're going to continue to sort of double down on.
That's amazing. I mean, do you think that you will kind of go out of the United States and Canada at some point and maybe try to make it more global just to do that
Yeah,
expansion?
definitely so. For now, like as far as I can see into the future, there is so much work to do in North America
There
because
is.
it's a very you know what I mean? It's a very precarious time
Yeah.
in American history, in North American history, and I want to stay focused. I want to stay focused on that. So I think that's the roadmap for definitely 2026 and potentially even more than next year. But ultimately, we're also at a precarious time in world history, and what we do is also world news, right?
Mhm.
And so we want to be able to spread that eventually. I wouldn't say it's not a short term goal. It's a medium to long term goal for us.
You know what's interesting? It just kind of came to my mind that you're giving this news that's unbiased again by advertisers and clickbait and sponsors and stuff. And what I feel your news is could really make a difference in especially like in the United States because you're just kind of giving the facts, right? You're just saying this is the news. And so taking out all the left wing, right wing, all that I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Trumper, a MAGA, whatever the case may be. You're just giving the facts. And I think if we had more of that, maybe people would let go of their thought process about I can only think of things this way and not any other way. And you're just giving them the news, the facts of it, and then letting them then try to decide with it without being influenced by a Fox or by a CNN, you know? And I think that's really unique. And I think it could be a game changer for the country and how they receive news and how people react to things. Because there's so much reaction whenever the people hear these stories about what's happening. And if you're keeping it neutral, then let them make their decision based on who they are, not how they're, being issued the news by a particular company.
I mean, that's exactly right. The way you just spoke, you really highlighted exactly our mission. So I really love how you put it. It's we're trying to empower independent thinking.
Mhm.
And so much of American media isn't leaving the space for independent thinking. It's
Yes.
leaving space for, are you subscribing to the red or to the blue button?
Yeah.
Right? Are you subscribing to this side or that side? Like pick a side, pick a side. Those other people are crazy. You're already correct. Are you with us or are you with them? Right? And that's the tribalism we spoke of earlier that is very destructive. Like I don't think it's a productive polarity. And I also don't think it ever should have been a polarity. And so it's difficult to connect with others, to think independently, and to sort of just be a civil being, right, in a culture where the media that you read is constantly dividing you and saying like red, blue,
Yeah.
us, them, us, them. And so I would say one thing to add to this response is most of what the everyday American person consumes is not news. It's news commentary,
Mhm.
right? When you go out into a bar, for example, common experience, and there's a TV playing, and there's an anchor on TV talking about the news, right? And you're on your phone, and there's social media, and there's someone talking about news all the time. It isn't actual news. It's people's interpretation, people's suggestion, people's kind of like a a redigest
Mhm.
of news.
Yeah.
And what we are doing is what the news pure is. Like it's what actual just what happened, where did it happen, when did it happen, and we stop short of suggesting how you should feel about it. And I think that's like again the simple but unprecedented innovation.
Would you ever kind of think about doing something where it's a quick 30-second or minute long, like audio or video that you're sending out to people so they can just watch a quick video and hear what's happening? Like, have you thought about doing something like that?
Yeah, we've launched that across TikTok and Instagram just
Oh, yeah.
recently.
You have cool,
And
awesome.
we're sort of, yeah, and we were sort of like kind of threading a fine line because we don't want to get into maximalist content around like, okay, well, we all know it matters what the anchor is wearing. It matters how the anchor looks. It matters the visual production of it. And we don't want to get into that world of optimizing for kind of like eye candy and aesthetic value
Yeah.
because we just want to be folks in information. So what we've been doing is sort of kind of like a cheeky solution is we would have a background, and usually I'm the one speaking on it or sitting on it. And as the video is playing, there are the top 3 highlights of the world-changing world news, or the news that changed the world in the last 24 hours, that are sort of displayed as very, very short, bullets. And so it's kind of a video because it's engaging and there are things kind of moving a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's also a reading experience. And it's helping folks, at least what we've heard, slow down their feed consumption. Here's a place to rest my eyes before the endless scroll continues.
Yeah.
So we've been experimenting with that a little bit.
That's awesome. And my last question is, what do you think about the future of media? Like, what kind of gives you hope?
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I'm very optimistic. I think the power of AI right now is very double-sided. It's the capacity to produce noise at a scale we've never seen before, and it's already flooding the market. But there's also the capacity, which we leverage, to denoise an overwhelm of content. And so I think it's going to get a little bit worse, more sensationalism, more clickbait, more bias, more manipulation, more chaos, and more of what I call attention terrorism, but not forever. That's not going to be the end state. I think that's going to be a phase that we're going to encounter and experience and deal with as an industry, as a culture, as a world. And so I do think, longer term, we will have news that serve our interests a lot better. We are maybe the first and a pioneer in this, but we're not going to be the only ones. And I think the amount of solutions that have come around that are looking to be much more mindful around media are going to change consumption habits. Short term, I'm very pessimistic, and long term, I'm very optimistic.
Awesome. I just want to end the podcast by saying, I think you should take a moment, if you don't do this already, and think about how amazing work that you're doing and how you're helping people. Because when you think about all the news and stuff, and we talked about this a little bit, but think of all the anxiety that people have from hearing the news and all the news that's not true facts, or it's I don't know, the journalist that's talking about it, or the news, the organization that's putting it out there has put a spin on it for their listeners that are in some ways a cult of their news station. And if you think about like what you're doing, you're getting rid of that anxiety in a lot of ways. You're getting rid of all that and you're helping people. And I just think that if you haven't thought about what amazing work that is, you should pat yourself on the back for it, because it's really great that you're delivering this, news in quick, bites of it as well. And you're delivering it the way that you're delivering it, quick and short. And it's not sponsored. There's no sponsor pushing you to say something the right way. So I think it's amazing what you're doing. And hopefully you take a moment sometimes to reflect on that great work that you're doing.
Zach, thank you very much. It means a lot coming from you. And I mean, that's why we do this work. We're looking to not just give people news. We're looking to give people the confidence, the awareness, and the peace of mind that comes with being informed without being influenced.
Awesome. Well, everybody, if you go to the description of this podcast or video that you're watching and go to the website, it's inform.now. If somebody wants to follow you, are you on social media or anything that they could follow you or find you? Or
absolutely, yeah. I'm Kira Shishkin across all platforms, and I'm very friendly, and I would love to connect with any like-minded folks. I'm the only Kira Shishkin in the world, which is kind of cool. It's easy to find.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I've signed up. I'm going to get my friends to sign up. I think a lot of our listeners are open-minded like this, where they'll want to sign up. So thank you so much for doing such a great, great project.
Zach, thank you so much for having me. This is meant to love to me. Thank you.
Everybody, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe. And if you think this episode resonates with somebody please be sure to share it with them and leave a comment and let us know what you think about the interview. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening.